morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning. Good morning,
morning.
everybody.
Welcome to the Daily Huddle. It is Tuesdays, and I'm here with my friends, my family, and particularly happy, as always, to be with my co-host, Kathryn Sabol. And on Tuesdays, we talk about communication and relationships. And today, Kathryn is going to kick us off into the conversation around, the tenure of relationships. Can your relationships last the test of time? So, Kathryn, tell us what's on your mind and heart today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tara. We do talk a lot about different aspects of relationships, but it did get me thinking about what makes relationships last. And I was watching a video one time with Tony Robbins, and he was speaking to the audience, and he asked the audience to raise their hands if they were married, and to lower them if they'd been married for 10 years, and then 20 years, and 30 years, and 40 years, and 50 years. And so there was one couple left at the end of it who had their hand raised, who had been married for more than 50 years. And he looked at him and he said, what's the secret? What's the secret sauce to being married so long? And the husband looked at the wife and he looked back at Tony Robbins and he said, we just never fell out of love at the same time. And that always stuck with me as like, is it really that simple that like, two people could be together and like they're for all the right reasons, one wants to leave, it never quite works out. And then, and I don't think that's true in every case, but it did get me thinking about what is it? What is the secret sauce to relationships? So I wanted to open up a conversation for us to talk about that because I think it really comes down to a couple of things. I think there's the whole chemistry thing. There's the whole, do you have a lot in common? There's a lot, what do you put into the relationship? But then I also think circumstances in life have a lot to do with it. So before we go into each one of those and what does it take, I'm curious what you think, Tara.
Yeah, once we decide on our topic, I'll typically spend days just kind of marinating on it and renumerating on it. And I think there are a few challenges in what cause relationships to dwindle. But for me personally, when I think back over relationships that I've had for many, many years, I think the first question is, do we want this relationship? Do we value it? Can we contribute to it? And does that other person contribute to it? So if we say absolutely, yes, I want this relationship, I think one of the biggest things that gets in the way, obviously circumstances and time, but something a little bit deeper than that is we look for relationships. We look for people with whom we agree and we align. And when we don't, that's when vulnerability and curiosity have to come into play, or I think that could cause a relationship to dwindle over time.
Or break. It could break. It could have a sudden break. I mean, we've seen that happen where people get into an argument.
Yeah.
And it just
and typically people change, right? It's not like I don't have the same views that I had when I was 22 years old. And a lot of my friends from high school, particularly, they do. And I cherish them and love them around those differences. And I think the more I've let them see the true me and the way that I've changed, the more beautiful the relationship has become, not fragmented.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to go one direction, but with that, I really think we should talk about authenticity. And because are we really letting people in to see us? Because I think those are there's all different types of relationships too, right? We're not just talking about like a spouse or a partner. There's surface level relationships, there's colleague relationships. But even in that, if we're vulnerable and authentic to who we are, then I think that does create, it gives the opportunity. It doesn't always create, it depends on the other person, but it does allow that bond to take place, I have a friend who said that they were going to get divorced. They had a child with special needs and they've been married for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And they just decided it just really wasn't working. And so they went to a class. I think they had to take a class before they could get divorced or something like that. They went to the class and they ended up doing some exercises in it. And like at the end of it, they looked at each other and they said, it's really not that bad, is it? And they ended up staying together and they've been married for 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like, wow, isn't that interesting that we get something stuck in our head that it has to be this way or that way? So I do wonder like about expectations. Like, what are our expectations of the other person? Because if they're outweighed, like if I'm expecting you, for instance, Tara, to, well, in our business relationship, if I'm expecting you to do the books or do all the technology behind the scenes, we're going to have some problems. It's going to get kind of tense. That's not your thing. You don't like it.
Dare you?
You asked me to write the communications. We might have a rumble.
Yeah.
But I think that's it too. It's like, what are the expectations and are they clear, of each of us? Like, here's what, and then I think it's so important. And I'm kind of like, I think we're all over the place with like the different pieces of it. I want to hone in on a couple, but I feel like designing the alliance between someone and really clearing the air on that and saying, this is what I expect of you. How do you feel about that? Or
Mhm.
I've noticed I'm harboring this and I hadn't said this to you, but I'm kind of expecting you to step in and do these things, Those are unwritten expectations that we end up sort of living to.
Can you give a specific example of what you mean by expectations?
Yeah, well, let's see. I've got a couple. Um, well, actually, it's funny. I'll say one about Tom. I hope he doesn't mind. But expecting, like just even expecting him to call at a certain time or be available at a certain time. If we do a pattern in a certain way, and then, I pick up the phone and call, or there's a period recently where, he was calling at the same time and then suddenly wasn't calling. We live in different cities, so that's our communication, our connection point. And
Mhm.
so then to not call suddenly without, for several days in a row, it was like, oh, I didn't realize that was my expectation, that he would be available and do this thing. And so even just something as simple as that, around logistics and what that can create, because then it was like, well, wait a minute, this isn't happening the way it normally does. What's going on? Why is that? And then all of the things, um, that can go along with that. Stories that you make up about why that is, or and instead, I think in the past, what I would do is just kind of go not deal with it. But now what I
Right.
do is deal with it head on. Really have direct conversation.
Don't you see that as a fact that I believe is that relationships, we can't expect them to stay the same. We can't that they'll stagnate. I think that they're either going to die out or they're going to grow. I just don't think that we can have the same expectations for the same experiences and the same interactions until the end of time.
And I agree with you. And it's communication is really the thing that's going to get you through those different changes. Because sometimes for me, I don't know how it is for you, but when things do change in a relationship, sometimes I don't realize it until it's like, oh, I'm still operating under this assumption, like that, everything's just like this, and then something changes,
Mhm.
maybe for the other person, or and it's like, oh, um,
And we
yes,
we bring our past, I think, um, trauma or experiences, whatever the case may be, to relationships. And I would say there's no playbook for that. There probably is somewhere, but I'm even learning at this stage of my life some of the things that I bring to a relationship that were instilled in me as a child, and
hmm.
I didn't really realize it. It was just modeled, and I never stopped to consider it. And
Like what?
I don't want to speak in generalities, so I'll be specific. Um, I'm learning that it takes a strength for me to idle.
Mm,
And I always saw idling because it was modeled to me as weakness and laziness. And, you're not on your goal, you're not after the win, you're not having championship mentality. It was never said to me, it was simply modeled. My mother was constantly doing until she literally crashed down at night. And my dad was going all the time. And
hmm.
so I think that instilled in me that to sit and idle, and I'll be very specific. Used to really bug me to watch Mike just scroll through crap on YouTube. Well, if that's what he wants to do for 20 minutes of his evening, why would that bother me? It
Yep.
did, until I realized that's my weakness, that I think this is a waste of time. We have
Mm,
so much time. That's me. and I've inflicted that on him. And I love what Fareed put in the chat. He said, can we call this agreements instead of expectations? And so I need to agree that Mike enjoys that and I don't.
Right. Well, I think that's a really good point that Free brought, because sometimes they aren't agreements. They are expectations that the other person doesn't know about. And then maybe to come together and get to a place of agreement or alignment even, because, we don't always have to agree. To your point, you don't agree that that's a good use of his time, but you're aligned that if he wants to spend it that way, then that's fine. I think that's really important. I think the expectations for me when I use the word in this context is something that I'm not fully conscious of.
Mm.
I'm expecting somebody to do this, but I don't know that they know that I have that expectation. So I think it's important to be aware of that stuff.
Yeah. So before we lean into Geo, what do you think is the clear takeaway from this conversation at this point?
Well, I think alignment, agreement, what are our hidden expectations, I think is so important, because I think that we all have them,
Mm-hmm.
and they do change over time.
Yeah.
And are we in communication with the person that we're in a relationship about that? Because I think the stuff that really breaks the relationship the fastest way is all of that hidden stuff under the surface that isn't dealt with or talked about.
Right.
It rots the foundation, and it's hard to come back from.
And so for me, and listening to you say this, I feel like it takes some courage to lean into this. And to me, sometimes it might get worse before it gets better. It might be, as Robin Sharma puts it, messy in the middle before it's glorious in the end. Not that there's an end, but you know what I'm saying? The journey, sometimes it's not fun to dig into some of these things, but I think it's worth it for relationships that we treasure. So I think Gio has something on his mind. Are you making notes, Gio, or did you change your mind? He needs just a minute. So,
the relationship is worth it. We can
yes,
wait. Yeah. I do think it would be an interesting practice. It'd be interesting if you and I even sat down and said, what do you think our expectations are? What are we aligned on? Because, it just works for us a lot of the times, but I think that would be really an interesting practice to see what comes out of it.
That, and I think also to explore what makes us different.
Yeah.
I think that too, just to celebrate the differences, as opposed to just assuming that we're always going to be aligned. I know how our skills are different, but our way we think and our beliefs, I think that could even add a whole new layer of complexity and trust and bonding to our friendship. So, I think he's ready, Giovanni. Now he looks frozen. Gio? I think he is frozen.
I think Gio's internet is gone.
All right, let's go with Chase and see if he can get back with us. Grand Rising, Chase.
Grand Rising to you, lovely soul. So I wanted to say this quote by James Baldwin that I wrote down a little while ago when we were talking about relationships, and I thought it was very moving. I've read it to myself several times since that day. So I just want to read this and then I'm out because it's so rich. The quote is, the longer I live, the more deeply I learn that love, whether we call it friendship, family, or romance, is the work of mirroring each other's light, gentle work, steadfast work, life-saving work in those moments when shame and sorrow occlude our own light from view. But there is still a clear-eyed, loving person to beam it back. In our best moments, we are that person for another. James Baldwin. I was like, woo.
I wish I would have read that yesterday morning. It's really beautiful. And I think that makes way for compassion, right?
My goodness, that quote. Just saying that you're there, you still have somebody looking back at you, and in our best moments, we are that person for another. It's like, that's it. I'm gonna put it in the chat anyway. It's a little deep, but I'm gonna put it right now. I have a little.
Please do. Yeah.
Couple moments. Thanks.
Thank you, Chase. And Gio's back.
All right, Gio, let's try it one more time, brother.
One more time. So one of the things that I was being showing up for me in this conversation is about I don't know how to word it, how to language it. The difference between length and quality. Like as a result of the field I am in, I no longer see long relationships as something I strive for. Like, oh, I hope I have this long relationship, given what I see that people go through to sustain a long relationship. And so when the question, like Tony Robbins asked, okay, so what did it take for you to be together for 50 years? An incredible amount of tolerance, for sure. And so I'm wondering for myself if there is this thing called the eternal present. I'm always in the now. There's no escaping it, right? I'm wondering if for me, what I'm looking for is Lent as the goal for the opportunity of enlightenment, or is it quality as the opportunity for expansion and growth in my relationships? And right now, I'll change my mind later, given that I'm often wrong, but right now, Lent, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's not my hero. It's not my thing. Like, oh, wow. Not really. It really depends. Well, what had to be endured for that? And was it worth enduring? Some people would say yes, because nobody really wants to look back and say, I messed up for 20 years. But anyway, that's kind of like what's triggering for me.
I love that perspective. I'm curious, what is your hero?
There's this, well, I don't know if hero was the right word, but there's this thing called the eternal present. I'm always here. It's always now. That never changes. So in my relationship, there is this opportunity to, if I'm going to evaluate, what does my relationship looks like now? And to have the kind of reflection to see, how do I make it better now? Today, right now. To look at my relationship, I've been together with Manisha for 9 years now, to look and say, well, the years that we've been together measures the quality of relationships. That would be the most inauthentic thing to say. It is the way it looks like right now.
Yeah. I love that the way you
that's kind of like
what
if that's what's being triggered right now. I don't know what I'm saying. I just wanted to share where it sort of is. My thoughts.
No, I'm glad that you did it. What comes up for me is that it's a living, breathing organism as you're looking at it and describing it right now. And like looking at a relationship and like it's static as you're talking about length and like it is this thing, but as you're in the present moment with it, it is a living, evolving, very different every moment. It's different right now. It's different right now, and it really gives it the what's the word, like honor, like that it deserves, like it's honoring of the relationship.
I would love to chime in here because I'm really glad you brought this up, because I've heard that Tony Robbins conversation in a couple different ways before, like, what's kept you, we didn't want to get divorced at the same time. And we congratulate people for being married for 50 years. And no doubt it should be congratulated. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but a lot of people who have been married for 50 years, I don't envy what they share. I'll just put it that way. We have some friends who never touch, never kiss. They sleep in separate bedrooms. They just do the work to share a bank account and a house. And to me, that is nothing to celebrate. That's heartbreaking to me. My feeling is repair it, make it better, or don't stay in it. That's my personal feeling. Everybody's different. But all that to say that I hear you so much, Gio, because I don't think length is the goal. I have friendships that I've had for 40 years, and if they live next door to me, I don't know that we would have the same friendship. But because we talk twice a year, it's beautiful and it's light and it's energy. But I'm with you. I want my relationships to be rich and have depth and trust and bonding and energy and connection. And that's what I'm after. And if it lasts if it lasts for a mighty long time, then what a massive gift that is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So, Rel, got something on your mind this morning?
Yeah, I do have something on my mind. And here's what I'm thinking as you, Gio, and Kathryn are creating this, is that I can fool myself into thinking that I'm not in a relationship with a stranger. Like, so I'm starting to think, okay, there isn't a single human being on the planet that I'm not in a relationship. What's different is the choice I make to invest time, attention, and everything else in the relationship. So it ebbs and flows, I guess. There are relationships I invest a lot in, and there are relationships I don't invest much in. And, for instance, my relationship with my father is a relationship I invest a lot in. I have a brother that don't spend as much time with him as I spend with my father, but yet the relationship is the same. So the question I have, Tara and Kathryn, is having a relationship a function of my investing time and things in it, or relationship something that's different from that? Like, I can have a relationship. I have a relationship with the person who's walking by, and it's characterized by the fact that I don't invest anything in it, but yet I'm related to that person. What are your thoughts on the matter? I'm conflicted with that.
I'm curious what Tara thinks, because I have a couple of thoughts about it, but yeah. Tara,
Well, as I'm listening to you, Sorrel, I'm thinking to myself, maybe we can't turn the clock back, but perhaps we should have defined relationship first, because we could talk about friendships. We could talk about business relationships. We could talk about significant others. We could talk about family relationships that we're kind of forced into, whether we want to be in them or not. And that's why I feel like the relationships that we do have the freedom to choose, and at the end of the day, we have freedom to choose all of them. But I think that I'm going to hang in there with my brothers, for example, if it wasn't positive, more than I would with someone that I met at a networking event a year ago. So, I don't know that I have the answer, except for maybe.
Yeah, I think you're touching on it. I guess the question I was grappling with is, what I call relationship, do I call them relationship because they're good and gratifying? And then I actually eliminate the ones that aren't good and gratifying, and I don't call them relationships. But there are relationships. They're just different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I tell you what, it's like hitting a nerve for me. And you probably don't remember this, but I told this story a very long time ago about me being on a diving board as a child and my dad forcing me to dive in front of all these people.
I remember.
Well, my book that I'm writing opens with that scene at the asking of the editor. And some beta readers have read it. And many of them have come back. The book has nothing to do with my dad. Well, I guess underneath it does, but many people have come back to say, I want to know more about your relationship with your father. And do you know what hits me when I hear that? Do I really have a relationship with my father?
I say you do.
I do, but it's not the kind of relationship that I aspire to have. It's not connected. It's not deep. It's not honest. It is one of duty, and it is a relationship, and it will last until one of us isn't here anymore. And I don't see it changing. So,
Yeah, and what you just said triggered this for me, Tara, is that when I was thinking about the investment of time, relationship, and also an investment in me being vulnerable, like there is that willingness that I think defines what the relationship is, regardless of how shitty it is right now.
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with you. That's what was coming up for me, because that's the real risky part for me, is to be vulnerable in that space. You might not get it back. The more vulnerable you are, the more chances you have to be hurt, the more you open yourself up. And so that's a deeper level of commitment, I think, and courage to step in. I venture to say that that does start to define the relationship in a different way, and say that that does become deeper. Even if it's not reciprocated, it's like I put myself out there for that. That's how much it meant to me.
Yeah, I want to hear what Cece has to say, but I'm just sitting here just like
Thank
really
you.
questioning what you are uncovering, Sorrel. And, I could do something about my relationship with my dad. I could really work hard to make us closer.
I
don't think that I want to.
One last thing that you just pointed to, Kathryn. You said it's worth it, even if the other party is not reciprocating. So that points to maybe, and I'll say what Gio says all the time. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about, but maybe it doesn't take two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
We are on a hard stop today, so I want to hear what Cece has to say, and maybe Gio can close us out.
Love it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. I just love this topic. What I noticed is my relationships with other people changed when I changed on the inside to the better. That means I'm working on myself so that I'm changing and they're responding to the changes that God is doing inside of me. That's the difference, where instead of me trying to make all these efforts, I changed from the inside out. And I didn't expect for my relationships, the other people to change. I was the one changing, and they changed because I changed to the better. Am I saying that right? Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Yes, I feel that. Thank you, Cece.
Thanks, Cece.
All right, Gio, let us know what you have on your mind, and maybe you can close us today.
It's a lot of pressure to close us, because this has been a real conversation, a beautiful conversation. Thank you for creating this space of inquiry. I like so in some degree, to try to close, I would say I really am taking away this possibility of not measuring my relationship by the time I'm in it. By the time I'm in it, the other aspect is I'm taking away. I'm always in a relationship with someone. I don't fool myself. I'm not in a relationship with you, Tara, or you, Kathryn, or you, Virtue. I'm always in a relationship with someone. And to capture what Cece's saying, I'm always in a relationship with myself. My relationship with others is my relationship with myself. And I love this aspect. It maybe doesn't take two to tango in the context of relationship. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one. So anyway, that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Gio. And I'm going to take us out with our tenets, and I'm going to start with love and love thyself. Don't forget that you're in a relationship with yourself. Laugh, get your sleep, eat those plants, move that body, give of your gifts, and don't forget to join us on the Daily Huddle every day at 9 a.m. Thanks, everybody. This has been great. We'll see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Love to you all.
Kathryn, Tara, family, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. I got to run. I got to take my girl to work.
Excellent job, everyone. Thank you.
Hey, Stan.
Thank you.
Yay.